Okay, one of the most difficult things in using InDesign for formatting is getting a useful EPUB from your document. Um, InDesign is not quite up to par of just taking your print file and say, make this into an ebook. It's not a snap of a finger. Um, and you really actually need two separate documents for your EPUB versus your print book, only because of the differences. But it is not impossible to get a decent PDF, I'm sorry, EPUB from your InDesign document. And this video is going to walk you through that process. Now, it's important to understand kind of what an ebook is first. And an ebook is basically a collection of web pages that are all lumped together in a file. There's a couple of instructional pages in there that tells ebook readers how to, what pages, what order the pages come in, and different character settings for how to view the fonts and sizes and stuff like that. And if you're familiar with web design and cascading style sheets, that's the same concept in an ebook, is that it has a CSS sheet to tell the reader how to view certain things. It has an image folder if there are any images in the ebook. Also, it has a font folder if you actually do embed fonts. And it has a what's called a manifest, which has the metadata for the ebook as well as instructions on what order all the pages come in. Also, there's a table of contents and things of that nature. So InDesign will do all that for you when you export to an EPUB. Now, something to know is that content on your master pages will not come through in an ebook. So our page numbers will not come through. Well, ebooks have no pages. Okay, they're reflowable. So that page number is actually always changing depending on the device, depending on the font settings the reader is using. So there are no set page numbers. So you can't tell me, hey, I have a correction on page 50 of my ebook. Can you change it? Your page 50 is not going to be what my page 50 is. So that's something important to know. So with that, nothing that is on your master pages is going to come through. So the first thing you have to think of, if you have any graphics on your master pages, we're going to have to place them in line somehow. Okay, so that's the first thing. I'm actually going to copy this just onto my clipboard, so I'm going to show you how I do it. Another thing to know is that InDesign, when it exports to an EPUB, it brings everything that is linked together. Okay, so the order that it's going to bring it in is it's going to bring in this text frame first, then it's going to bring in the table of contents text frame, and then it's going to bring in our master text frame that's all linked together. If for some reason you have an InDesign document and you didn't add in a table of contents until later, and the table of contents is actually visually in between two pages, but all the text frames are linked and links over the table of contents, that means your table of contents is going to come in at the end. Okay, so linked text frames come in together. Also, with ebooks, you have to think about page breaks. Okay, so the way we have this set up, InDesign isn't going to automatically create page breaks out of everything. So what it's going to do is everything that's linked in a text frame, it's going to put them all together in one file. And for ebook building, although you can have it all come in together in one file, but unfortunately not all ebook devices read page breaks in the CSS. So I prefer to actually set each page directly. All right, I know that's kind of confusing, but I'm going to give you an example of that in just a minute. So this is a file the client, when I do work for clients and I send them their first draft, I always say, hey, here's your first print ready. I mean, your first print draft. Please review and let me know if you need any changes. I do not do the ebook until I get their approval. So once the client comes back and says, oh, I have changes, I'll make the changes. And then once she approves it, I will send them a final print ready PDF. And then I'll say, okay, it's time to move on for the ebook. But I never work on them simultaneously because if you do the ebook, if you create the ebook before they finalize the print, and they come back with a million changes, you're going to have to make those changes in both files. And if you're like me and you open the EPUB and do a lot of work behind the scenes outside of InDesign, you're going to have to make changes in all the individual HTML files. And if you have never really worked with HTML, that can be confusing, and that can also open up to introduce errors into the EPUB. So we want to minimize that. So do not create your EPUB until your print interior is 100% done. Now, you can go back in and make changes eventually, but this is just the best method to alleviate any errors that can be introduced into the EPUB and to stop having to make changes into files. Now, because you'll see based on this video all these little tweaks that we have to do to the InDesign file and the reason why we need two different files from the print book to the ebook. Okay. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do after I know it's final, I actually resave my file name and I always call it the book title underscore interior final underscore 01. All right. Now, if you've listened to me before, it's important to get in the habit of saving things without spaces. Why is that? Because ebooks do not need spaces. They will not read spaces. There's no spaces in file names in ebooks. And when you have spaces, a lot of times it will add some weird characters in the names of the files that I just think it's unnecessary. So when I save things, I always save them without any spaces. I always use an underscore instead of a space. And then like here, you may not can see it in the video, but the name of this book is Tea and Sympathy. So I have capital T E A, capital A N D, and then sympathy with a capital S. So I can read the book fairly easily when you use those capital letters, kind of like spaces, I guess you could say. All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to, now that I've saved this as a interior final, I'm just going to go ahead and create the final PDF for the client, just so it'll say final. This book does not have any bleeds, so I do not need to export it with any bleed settings, but if there were bleeds, I would need to export it with that 1/8 of an inch around. All right, so now that I've got the final PDF, I never get rid of my table of contents. So I will actually just go into the PDF and delete that, but I have to delete 2 pages. So I'm just going to delete those and then I'm going to save it. Because I like to keep my table of contents in there for the ebook. Let's just make sure. I just like to make sure I deleted the proper number of pages, and I like to make sure that we have that blank page at the end. Okay, so we do, and this is all good, and so I'll send that to the client and let her know that's her final print ready file that she can upload to KDP or Ingram Spark. All right, now that I've done that, the next thing I do is I go ahead and do a file save as, and I actually have a folder outside of the interior, and I have an ebook folder. And what I'm going to do now is that I'm just going to call it by the book name. All right, I'm not going to add anything else because when InDesign exports this book, all the individual pages within the ebook will be called whatever your file name is. And so if I say interior final 01, it's too cumbersome. So I like to keep it simple and just name it the book title. All right, I don't even worry about numbering this one. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and generate the table of contents. All right, and this is going to be normal. And we'll fix this later. I'm not too concerned about it right now. I'm just going to show you what a quick export does. So we're going to export. To export from InDesign as an EPUB, you go to File, Export, and then bring your Save as file type down below, and you'll see all these different options. There are two EPUB formats. There's an EPUB fixed layout. Only use that if you're doing children's illustrated books. And there's EPUB reflowable. That is what all novels should be done in, is a reflowable EPUB. All right, we're going to click on Save. And we're not going to worry about setting any of this up just yet. I will show you that. The last thing is if you want to view the EPUB after export, which is what we're going to do, and I have this Blue Fire reader. You can also use Adobe Digital Editions. There's many different EPUB viewers out there. I'm going to click on OK, and we're going to view what it looks like. It's going to tell me there's a font missing, which is okay. I'm not concerned about that. We're going to fix that in a minute. And then we are going to look at, I'm going to quickly bring up the PDF that we just created, just so we can view it and see how it looks compared to the EPUB. Okay. All right, so here is the PDF. And I've lost my little bar. All right, there we go. And here's what it looks like as an ebook. Okay, you'll see the title is kind of cut in half. We have this weird thing going on. We have like, oh, come on, not responding. All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to see about maybe opening this up in Adobe Digital Editions. All right, so here we go. All right, here's how the title page comes through. And then there's another title page. What's up with that? I'll show you that in a minute. And here is the copyright page. It's all the way up to the top, which if you know me, I prefer it to start lower. Other books, this is all at the top of the page. I prefer it to start lower. I don't even know what that is. Here's the contents page, but it has like page numbers and it's just kind of all weird. And this is, look at that G and how it is. And this is just so low. I don't want that. Also, where's my little teapot? And I would prefer this to be in a script. All right, so here's a seam break that's a little spaced. I mean, that needs more space. Here's another drop cap that looks a little funny. Another drop cap that looks a little funny. Then chapter 2, there's like no break between chapter 1 and where chapter 1 ends and chapter 2 starts. Yeah, so this isn't the most prettiest thing. So this is why we make changes in InDesign, because we don't like how just the quick export happens. Okay. So first thing we're going to look at is why did certain things come through the way they did. Okay. We have another title page somewhere. I do not see it anywhere, but I know it's there because we saw it in the document. So we need to figure that out. We have these symbols right here that are not coming through. They actually did come through. We just didn't see them. So one of the major things that you're going to be doing to generate a decent ebook is cleaning up the document. Okay, so step 1 in cleaning the document, and I am actually going to open up our little template and I'm going to show you a little checklist that I have in our master template. Okay, so this is the master template once it pops up. And I actually have instructions here for ebook formatting. And so the first instruction for ebook formatting is don't start the ebook until the print interior has been approved by the client. Once you start the ebook, you will need to make edits in both files. So I just talked about that. Save a new version of the final print file. I prefer to save it in just as the book name. Again, no spaces, in a new folder, and I name the folder ebook, which I just showed you. Any graphics used on the master pages will need to be placed in line, so removed from the master pages and placed where needed using a style such as underscore image or underscore ornament. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do first, okay? So what we can do is, first of all, we can get rid of our blank pages, okay? And we have this little teapot. This teapot is not going to come through because it's on the master page. And if you remember, when I was on my master page a few minutes ago, I actually copied the teapot and had it in my clipboard. So now I have pasted it. So inline, what does inline mean? Well, if I just place this teapot here, it's not going to come through with this text frame where it needs to. It's not going to come through above chapter 14 because what did I say? Things that are linked, so these threaded text frames will come first and then this will come after. So this is actually going to come at the end of the document. So to prevent that from happening, we place them in line. Now, some people will just take this, they'll just drop an anchor here and now it's linked and now it's in line, now it'll come through. I don't like to use that method. I like to place them in line. So I'm going to go right here. This is our chapter title. I'm actually just going to hit the enter key. I'm going to create a new line. It's currently styled as chapter title, but we are actually going to call it ornament split for ebook. All right, so that actually came on this page, and we're going to make a couple of tweaks to it. Right now, there is a left indent. I'm sorry, a first line indent of 0.25. I need to make a note of that to change it in my template. Ornament left indent. All right, so now I'm going to zero that left indent or that hanging indent, that first line indent. And I actually want the teapot to start lower on the page, okay? So I'm actually going to say I want an inch space above this line, okay? Below, I don't really need a large space because it's going to be the teapot and then the chapter title. And that's all I need. I don't need anything else. Except one thing, we are going to edit this style. We're going to look at one thing. Export tagging, okay? Split document, EPUB only. Make sure this is checked for any styles you want to come through as a new page. So that teapot is going to be the first page because it's the chapter title page, and we want those to be new pages. So I actually prefer to split my EPUB there. Now, InDesign will bring in, if you have your keep options saved where start paragraph on next page, InDesign will actually bring in code in the CSS called page break before or page break after. And there's different settings for it, but not all e-readers understand that. Okay, that is not a universal CSS code throughout ebooks. Okay, I prefer to get rid of those and use and break my pages using that EPUB split. All right, maybe one day there's going to be a better way to do it, but prior to using InDesign to create EPUBs, I actually used to hand code them. We would take the InDesign file, or I may have been doing formatting in Word then as well, but I used to do it both in Word and in InDesign, but now I do everything in InDesign. So you take that PDF, or we used to take the Word document or the final InDesign document, and we basically cut and pasted into a template that we built using Dreamweaver and creating the ebook from hand. So we would go in and hand code it. So that has helped me have a great understanding of ebooks and how they're built because I actually used to do it without any automation. So we are going to do the split document EPUB only, and just for sake of knowing that this is going to be a new page, I'm going to start paragraph on next page, but I will remove that in the ebook. All right, so now that I have my line here, I'm going to paste my little graphic, okay? When graphics are in line, the most important thing to look at is your leading. Your leading needs to be set to auto. If you have a number for your leading, it has the potential to cut off your image. But when you have it set to auto, your leading is going to conform to whatever content is on that line. So since this teapot's on that line, it's going to make the line space the size of the teapot. All right, so now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take this and I am just going to scroll through. This chapter only has, this book only has 14 chapters. If it had more than 20, I probably would try to do this more automated. But I am just, with only 14 chapters, it'll take me just as long as it would building a find and replace grep in the find and replace menu. So you can actually paste your clipboard contents using find and replace, but it depends on my mood. I'm just going to do it quick like this. Same difference for me. Now, 30, 40 chapters, yes, I'd be finding a way to do it in the find and replace. Okay. All right. So chapter 5, chapter 4, chapter 3, chapter 2, and chapter 1. All right. So now what I'm going to do, let's look at our little instructions so I can stay on tasks. So we just did this. We pulled that graphic from the master pages and we placed it in line. The next thing is determine where you want your ebook to have page breaks. I usually have them after the chapter title, after the copyright page, after each front matter page, after each chapter, and after each back matter page. Okay. You will need to set styles to break in that export tagging split document, which I just showed you. You will need to create new styles on certain pages to set the page break. I usually do this by adding a 1 to the current style. For example, copyright 1 for the first line of the copyright page, so it'll break there. I'm going to walk you through what I mean by that. So I know I want a page break here. So before this line right here, in between the title page and the copyright page, I want this to be a page break. I already have a style set up called Copyright 1 ebook split. I'm going to edit it. I'm going to make sure it's not, but I'm going to select it. So we need Copyright 1 to split. Okay. And I also have, for that particular style, I'm going to add a 1-inch top so it starts lower on the page, and then I'm just going to redefine that style. Okay. Now, this is other titles, and wherever I have other titles, I can go ahead and tell it to split the document for the EPUB because I don't need to add the little graphic here. This is just other titles, so we'll just make that as our split document. Also for this, I like to make sure there is a 1-inch space before, just so it starts lower on a page. Now, InDesign ignores that space before, but when it exports to an EPUB, it doesn't ignore it. It actually puts in 72 pixels for the space above this particular style. All right, I had ampersand, special ampersands, so there were some overrides here, so I'm just going to clear those out just so I don't, when you use overrides, when you have overrides in your text, it creates a very kind of dirty InDesign EPUB document, so I like to clean that up. Also like to get rid of any unnecessary pages and lines. Something that's important to know, you'll notice I don't have any paragraph marks between these. I used space above paragraph styles. So you'll notice that there is an 1/8 of an inch space above these, so that creates the line space. That's very important with ebooks, is that sometimes blank lines will not come through unless you have a non-breaking space on that blank line. So it's a good habit to not use just a blank paragraph mark, especially for ebooks. So I never use them. I will always create a style that says space above for those particular areas. It's much better, creates a much cleaner document. All right. I like to delete any blank text frames. That's very important. The table of contents, we know we want that to come onto a new page. This contents right here is set to other titles, and because we told this, which is also other titles, to split for ebook, contents is also going to split. We do not need page numbers in an ebook because there are no such thing as page numbers. So we need to get rid of this out of our table of contents. We also need to get rid of these numbers. They're not necessary. So I'm actually going to update my style for that. I'm just going to take off the number. Then I'm going to redefine my style. So that got rid of those. Now I'm going to get rid of the page numbers here. So to do that, we're going to go to Layout, Update Table of Contents. Okay, so to adjust the table of contents, we're going to go to Layout, Update Table of Contents. All right, it's the second time I've tried it, still hasn't come up. So hold on just a minute. Okay, so silly me, I meant to go to Layout, Table of Contents Styles. That's where we need to edit it. This menu is going to come up and all of the table of contents that you have within the document will be listed here. If you use my template, it'll say TOC and you'll just click on Edit. So this is the table of contents. First thing is we don't need chapter headings to be a level 2. We do not have any part titles, so I'm actually going to remove that. We'll click on Other Titles and tell it to have no page number. Okay, and it's actually set to TOC Other Title, which is fine. Chapter Titles is also set to TOC Chapter Title. And then the page numbers, you just click on No Page Number and then click on OK. Now we need to go to update it. All right, so that got rid of the page numbers. I can realign this block. And here's our table of contents continues on this side. And then we can delete this page. Just try to get rid of all those empty pages. We can get rid of this. Now, we have done all that, and we're going to look at the next thing on our checklist. All right, so we need to make sure, let's continue on through our document to make sure we have everything set to split. So we know we want page breaks here, and we know already that we actually set those up. So export, tagging, split document, so we're good there. All right, the next thing that we need to do is to clear out all our overrides. And so what does that mean? It's all those areas where we have this special teal colored text where we have adjusted whether it be the tracking or the kerning or something. We adjusted it for the print book. We don't want all of that because that will create overrides. So I am just going to select all and clear overrides. Now, it's important that you do not clear overrides unless You absolutely uh, can. Okay, so if you have the habit of not using your styles, don't do this. Okay, you would need to go one at a time to clear each thing yourself. Um, I have a habit of using styles, so I'm comfortable with clearing all the overrides. So let's say you had a block quote, but you didn't set it to a block quote. You just changed it to local formatting. Well, now that's going to go away. Okay. So I am okay with clearing overrides. Then I'm going to come back here. Here is the back matter. We know we need a page break here. About the author is set to other titles, so it should come through as a page break. All right, now that we've got the overrides done, I'm going to quickly look at our little checklist. I want to make sure I go in the right order. Otherwise, I will be all over the place. And I'm trying to stay very organized on these videos. So in my instructions at this point, I say export document to EPUB, review to make sure the page breaks look right. Sometimes I crack open and review each XHTML page to make sure that everything's split properly. If not, I'll redo the EPUB. I'm not going to worry about this at this point, but I will take a look at that before I start making too many tweaks. Okay. And so the rest of these instructions, I actually need to come in here and modify this. So by the time you get this, the instructions will look a little bit different, because the rest of these instructions from number 5 on are specifically about the actual EPUB document that comes out of InDesign. So I take it and I break it open, and I do all these things to it to create a better EPUB. But I'm going to spend a little bit of time looking at the InDesign document before I get that far. And this particular book, this font right here is called Parisian. It is a Google font. Okay, we can import Google fonts into our InDesign, into our EPUBs, okay, without needing encryption. So that's the important part. When we utilize fonts in eBooks, straight as InDesign exports them, Kindle, when it converts it to the Kindle format, the fonts will not view. Okay, and that's because there's an encryption built in. For some reason, as of this recording, Kindle will not bring in those fonts unless you remove that encryption. Okay, so I know it sounds a little complex right now, but we'll get there eventually. I'm going to show you my method so that this book will come through with these fonts. Okay, all right, now in this particular book, I have these drop cap L, drop cap T's. I had all these kind of special drop caps. I'm actually going to delete them. Oh, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Hold on. I'm going to delete them and just name them drop cap, because I don't want all of these different styles, because unfortunately that just doesn't work right with an ebook. All right, there's another style in here that I'm going to get rid of, and that's this no break style. This no break style does not work in an ebook, so we're just going to get rid of that. Another thing to prevent any issues, I'm just going to go to my chapter text style. I'm going to edit it, and under grep style, I'm going to delete these two little options right here, because that is where that no break style came into play. That doesn't work for an ebook, so I'm going to get rid of that. Then let's see. The next thing I do, although it's no longer really necessary, I still prefer to do it, and that's really kind of clean up my styles. All right, so I'm going to go to my character styles panel. I'm going to do a select all unused. I'm going to delete ones out that are unused. I'm also going to delete this style group. Then I'm going to sort by name, just so it's alphabetical, and that's so so this will come through alphabetical in the CSS, because I like having clean CSS pages. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing for the paragraph styles. I'm going to do select all unused, and I'm going to delete those out. We do not need to change it. One thing that you can do, you don't have to do it, but I prefer to do it this way. I like to set all of my pages to a C master. And then I just go in and delete all these master pages because that's going to get rid of a couple more styles that I don't need. So we're going to do a select all, select unused. We're going to delete them there. The next thing we're going to do is I am just going to take these and I'm going to move everything out of a folder. Reason being is that when they're in folders, they're going to come through in the ebook with that name of the folder. And I just like a cleaner ebook. Again, this step is not necessary. It's just me and my need for a very clean cascading style sheet because it's easier to look through and visually see what's going on. So then I can delete all these folders. Used to be, if you didn't sort it, InDesign would not bring it, would bring it in however you have listed. I don't know if that's still the case. I don't think I need this normal style, but I'm just going to do a search in the document to see. I think I need to reboot my computer. It is not behaving properly. All right, so we're going to do Control F. We are going to find the normal style in the document. Okay, so we can delete it. All right, so there we go. Let's see. For some reason, I don't know why this is pink. All right, it's saying it's not available, so I'm just going to Parisian change that. Okay. All right, that got rid of the pink. Can I just do a quick look over? There's a couple of things that we can do to help with ebooks, and that's add more space in those areas like this is a space above. For Kindle, the way Kindle reads an EPUB, it reads spaces a little bit differently. So a space like this looks fine in an EPUB, but in a Kindle, that space looks very narrow. So anytime I have space above, I often go through and just double that in my styles. Also, Kindle with this much of an indent looks very poor. Okay, it barely looks like a letter space, which I don't like. So I will go in and modify the code to be point. I'll change the code from, I think it comes through as 36 pixels. I'll change it to 1 EM, but I'll show you that in a minute. But for now, I'm just going to make it be ½ inch. Okay, because if you forget to change it to 1 EM in the ebook, ½ inch shows up okay on a Kindle. Also going to add more space above and more space below the seam breaks. And just going to look through everything. We don't need to worry about the yellow text. That's not going to cause any issues. We're going to look at this in the ebook to see how it comes out. All right, here's a blank one that we need to get rid of, otherwise it's going to come in. I'm just making sure nothing looks a little weird or off. Actually, you know what? One thing I did forget. We have these block quotes, okay? For block quotes, I typically might like to make them in a little bit more than the indent. So right now it's the same as the indent, so I'm just going to push that in a little bit more at 0.5. I'm going to take the space above higher, to take the space below higher. And this is just so it looks better in the ebook. I need to create a new character style here. And then this is a chapter text space above. I just need to make that higher, change it to 0.5. Now, it looks funny here, but when we get into an ebook, it'll look good. So we're just going to quickly glance through everything. Yeah, speed glancing. When you've been doing this as long as I have, this is how you do it. And you can usually spot issues pretty quick once you know what to look for. All right, so we're just checking that. That's good. You hear my husband in the background. He's being obnoxious. All right. Now, if you ever put in hard line breaks, these can cause issues. So I try to avoid them for this reason. But if for some reason you put them in, always do a check. You can always search for them for forced line breaks. There are no more. We're good. We found the only one. So we can continue scrolling through the end. Okay. Again, we delete blank pages. And I think we're good. Okay. All right, so now we need to do something with the, actually I'm gonna add creative, and change the style to copyright, no space. Now, for the chapter title page, if we want it to come in looking exactly like this, I need to turn this into an image. So what I prefer to do is I like to open up the PDF. We're actually going to open this up in Photoshop. I just convert this to an image and just save it. But one thing that you need to be careful about when you do that is if these are the text variables, we need to just make them the text. Okay. So, okay. So the only one that was the text variables was the book title. Okay. And I am just waiting for Photoshop to open. So we are going to come over here. We are going to open up Photoshop. Let's see, what are we doing? We are opening up the PDF for this. So, book one, interior. I'm opening up this page. And then what I like to do is I like to just go in and tell Photoshop to trim this image. And then I'll just save it. I'll export it as, we want to export it as a PNG. And, you know, I'm usually okay with about a 600 width. We don't want the file size to be incredibly large. So if we do 600 width, that gives us about a 34 kilobyte file, which is good. And 600 pixels is going to look okay. And I'm going to save it back in her folder. In the ebook folder, I'm going to create a links and then I'm just going to save it as title. And we are going to come here and delete all this out. Okay. And we are going to delete these out. And we are going to change the style for this line. We're just going to call it ornament split for ebook. That's fine. And we are going to place that title PNG here. Now, you see what happened? All right, sometimes when you place graphics, if they're wider than the text frame, this is what happens. You'll see if we took it this way and widened it, we may eventually see it. Really depends. Okay. We might have to widen it really a great deal, but what I do in these situations, after I place it, I will do a Control Z. When you Control Z it, it gives you that image in a placeholder. I just drop it in, and then I go in and adjust the width. We could probably do about 3.5 inches for the width. And we are then going to cut it and then place it. Okay. So that's how I typically work it. Now, I want space above. I want this to be lower, so that particular character style we applied to this line has a 1-inch space above, so I think we're good. And I think we're ready to export it as an EPUB now. So what we do is we're going to go to File, Export, EPUB Reflowable. Make sure I don't have it open anywhere. We're going to save, and we're going to save as, and then we're actually going to change all the content here. Whereas before, when I exported it, we didn't change anything. Now we are. So the first thing is to determine whether you want to do an EPUB 2 or an EPUB 3. Those are the two choices. The difference between the two is that an EPUB 2 does not generate a TOC XHTML page. It generates a TOC NCX page. And an EPUB 3 generates both of them, the NCX and the XHTML TOC page. Really, there's a couple minor differences, but those are the two big ones. If you have a client or if you use Draft to Digital has this process where you can go through your EPUB and make updates yourself. Okay, their system allows that. They have some sort of automated process that takes your EPUB and it will make changes into it. If that EPUB is an EPUB 3, their little, whatever you want to call it, their little tool to make updates to the EPUB does not work. All right. If you save it as an EPUB 2.0, it will. Okay. So if the book is for just Amazon, you can tell it to do an EPUB 3. If it is one that does wide, then I would do EPUB 2, because chances are, if they're wide, they are probably using Draft to Digital for distribution. And they may want to use that feature. For this one, I know she does Kindle. I know she is in Select KU. So I'm going to just make it an EPUB 3.0. The next thing is cover. All right, you want to choose your cover image. And what I like to do is, at this point, I like to go ahead and optimize the cover. Okay, so here is her cover. We are going to go to File, Export, Export As. First of all, you need to make sure it's RGB and not CMYK, because the cover will not view if it is saved as a CMYK. So that's something important. We want to save it as a JPEG. Now, Amazon charges a fee, a file delivery fee, based on the size of the ebook file. So It they say it is usually 1 cent per 15, um, oh, what is it? 1 cent per megabyte, something like that. And but there's a base, of course. I think I always shoot for my EPUB files to be around 500 kilobytes, and that usually results in about a 7 cent delivery fee. All right, so I think it's 15 cents per megabyte is what it is. So your goal is to have a small file size. And since we actually include ebook covers in our ebooks, we our covers are going to be our largest file size. So right now, this cover is 1.7 megabytes. Based on that 15 cent per megabyte, just this almost 2 megabyte cover could cost 20, 30 cents in delivery fees. So we want to get that lower. I always shoot to have the cover to be 200 megabytes or less. Definitely make sure it's a JPEG. I usually shoot my width to be about 600, and right now it's 407 kilobytes. So I am going to lower my quality to be around 60%. You can play with that. So the quality is 60%. The image size is 600 by 957 pixels. And right now my file size is 115 kilobytes. Not the best quality, but it doesn't need to be incredibly large because Kindle will also include the cover that was uploaded uh, when you upload your Kindle file, it uploads that cover as well. So this is only for the ebook. All right, so I'm going to save it in that same links folder. I'm going to call it cover. It's going to be a JPEG. And then we are going to go back to our InDesign document. So we're going to choose image and we're going to tell it to look in that file. So ebook links. Little bug in InDesign, for some reason, it doesn't allow you to look in all the files in that folder. You have to change it to JPEG here. It's annoying. It defaults to a GIF, and then you select your cover and click on open. So it's going to bring in that cover for your file name. All right, navigation TOC. This is important. You want it to be a multi-level TOC, and you want it to be whatever TOC you built for that one page that we created. If you use my template, then it's going to be called TOC. So make sure you change that. Content order is always going to be based on page layout. We want to split the document based on paragraph style export tags. So all those little areas where we told it to split, that's where it's going to split. Okay. If you only had one type of paragraph style, like maybe what I used to do is I created a break paragraph style, and I put that paragraph style wherever I wanted it to break. I could have told it to single paragraph style to break, but I started doing it a little bit differently, just naming each little style, setting it to split. So I will use this based on paragraph style export tag. All right. Next, click on your text tab. There's nothing you need to worry about here. Even if you tell it to remove, not to tell it to remove forced line breaks, sometimes it still does. This has always been a little buggy. I just don't keep them in. Placement for endnotes. This document doesn't have endnotes, so footnotes, so we don't need to worry about it. Lists, we don't need to worry about it because there's no bullets and numbers in here. So now we're going to select on object. We want to preserve the appearance from the layout, so make sure that's checked. We don't need to worry about using existing image for graphic objects. CSS size, it defaults to fixed. Change it to relative to text flow. If you set it to fix, all of your images are going to come in pixels, all right? So what that means is that it may tell our little teapot to come in at like 200 pixels wide. Well, if we view that on an iPad, that little teapot is going to look really small because we're telling it to view at only 200 pixels. Whereas on a phone, it may look really big because we're telling it to view at 200 pixels. If we tell it to bring in relative to text size, instead of providing a pixel size in the CSS, it's going to make it a percentage. So our little teapot will probably come in at around 35, 40% of screen width. All right. So that's going to be how you can get your graphics to kind of resize based on the reading device that the reader is using. So always select relative to text flow. Don't worry about anything else. You don't need to worry about layout, align, center, space before or after, insert page break. You don't need to worry about any of that. And don't worry about ignore object export settings. You probably don't have any. Click on conversion settings. This is where you can tell it what do you want it to bring in images. If you have a lot of images, I would automatically tell them to come as JPEGs because the JPEGs for photographs are going to be smaller than a PNG. This only has our little teapot and our scene break, so it's fine to bring over. Those are probably going to come through as PNGs, so that's fine. You can tell it what resolution. If you have a lot of images, you want to go low because remember, we're trying to keep that file size down. I just keep the default at 150 and then I will manually look at the size of my images after they're exported and I will manually tweak the size if needed. Again, for JPEG options, you can adjust that image quality to make the file size smaller. I usually never use GIF in eBooks, so I never worry about that one. On HTML and CSS, we want to include classes in HTML. We want to generate the CSS. I usually add about a 25 pixel page margin. I don't have any overrides in here. So I really don't need to check or decheck this, but I do anyway, because if for some reason I do have a local override, I don't want it to bring it in. Include embeddable fonts. I have been building ebooks for over 10 years now, and hasn't been until probably the past 6 months, past year, have I decided to finally embed fonts in ebooks because it's a difficult process to get it right. And not all ebook devices will actually view the font. But I had a client challenge me one time, and she was showing me, some ebooks, and she really wanted this ebook to look a certain way. And well, that ebook was formatted in Vellum, and Vellum does embed the fonts, so they have to be able to do it somehow. So I investigated a little bit and realized that Vellum uses Google Fonts, right? So that's how they do it. When you embed fonts in an ebook using InDesign, InDesign encrypts your file. Why? Most font licensing requires you to encrypt that file to adjudicate, I think is what it is. There's a word that I don't know how quite pronounce it, but it basically encrypts the font file so that a user cannot open that ebook and pull out that font and use that font for their own purposes. All right. So there is an encryption process that InDesign uses so that you can embed fonts. However, depending on the font, you really need to look at the license for each individual fonts. If you are using fonts from Adobe Typekit, you can embed them in an ebook as long as it is encrypted. Now, when you take that encrypted EPUB and use KDP to create the Kindle format, it doesn't work. For some reason, when a file is encrypted for the fonts, Kindle will not bring in those fonts. It will not view the EPUB, or it will not convert your EPUB into a Kindle format where the fonts are viewable. The only way is if you do not have the encryption in the file. If you use Adobe Typekit fonts, you have to have that encryption. If you use Google fonts are open source licensing, or they're Apache licensed fonts, meaning they're open source, they're free. You're welcome to embed that font into an ebook without having to encrypt it. So if you are going to embed fonts, make sure you embed them properly. And if you embed fonts and you want it to show up for Kindle, you have to use fonts such as Google fonts that do not need encryption. All right. I will include, probably do a little bit more. I believe I have a video available on how to do this, and I'm actually using Google Fonts for this particular document, so I'm going to show you the process that I do. So we'll get into that a little bit. So if you want the fonts to stay intact, click on Include Embeddable Fonts. If you don't care about the fonts, which is the best option, you can decheck that. All right. So I'm going to check it because I'm going to keep it in. JavaScript, unless there's some special JavaScript that you need to embed into the file, I have never done this, so ignore it. Metadata, this is where you're just going to type in the book title. A word to the wise on metadata, this particular title has an ampersand in it. You cannot have ampersands in your metadata, so you need to spell out those ampersands. All right, so the creator is going to be the author. The date has to go in this format. We have a 4-digit year, followed by a 2-digit month, followed by a 2-digit date. Description, this is where you could drop in a book blurb if you wanted. Publisher, if there was a publisher. Rights, all rights reserved if you wanted to include that, and then if you wanted to include the subject. I usually leave those blank. You can always edit the EPUB and add more metadata, such as keywords. I usually leave them blank. You can tell InDesign how you want to view it. It's going to view Adobe Digital Editions, and we're going to click on OK. And so InDesign is going through the process of creating the ebook. So here it is, this table of contents here. This is built based on that export settings in the EPUB where we told it to do the navigation TOC. This is how it built that navigation TOC. Landmarks, this is on the content OPF page. You can add other landmarks if you want. I usually just leave these, but you can also add start of text, back matter. There's only certain landmarks that you can include, so it's important to know those if you do mess around with that and add more landmarks. Okay. We're just going to take a quick look to see if we notice any issues right off the bat. Okay. I am noticing one thing is that this was set as Cinzel, however you want to say that font, but it did not come through. So we need to kind of look at that and figure out why. You'll notice that these letters look a little wonky. We're going to need to do some adjustment for those to look properly, which we will. And everything else looks okay. So about the author didn't come through as Cinzel. We have a teapot there for some reason. That means we have a rogue teapot somewhere in our file. And now we can close it. All right, I'm going to look for that rogue teapot. It's somewhere in here. There it is. So we're going to delete that out. Remember how I said text file, you know, they come through in order, even though that Rogue Teapot was like around page 31. It didn't come through until the end. That's because all of these text frames came through first. Okay. All right, so this is Cinzel, and Cinzel is actually a Google font, so I know we can embed it. So why it didn't embed it is beyond me, but we'll figure that out. All right, so I am going to export this again. Once you export it, all your settings stay the same, so we do not need to go through all of this again for this particular book. All right. So now what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to open it. I'm going to bring it over. So we need to go to book 1, ebook. So this is the EPUB that we generated. I'm going to go ahead and close out the InDesign file and save it. And then we're just going to quickly look at our checklist now. I just want to make sure I have everything. All right. Yep, we're good. Make sure I know the process that I gave you so I can make sure I stick to it. So now that we have the EPUB, what we're going to do is we're going to just copy this file and we're going to paste it. So it's going to paste a copy of that. We are going to change the name. Now, to make this be effective, we need to make sure that we have our extensions. So you need to be able to see your extensions. If you don't show your extensions on your computer, you need to go through the process of doing that and always forget where to go change that. You can do a search for show extensions Windows 10, and it'll walk you through the process how to make sure you see the file types. Okay, because that's very important with EPUBs. So we are going to change the name of that copied file to epub.zip. It's going to give you a warning that it may become unstable, but an EPUB is just really a zip file undercover, just like a docx file, a newer Word document file. It's actually, you can convert a docx into a zip folder and you can unzip it and see all the information that's within that Word document. So it's the same thing. So we're going to save this as an EPUB zip, then we are going to extract it. And here is our extracted EPUB file. This is an EPUB file. There is a MIME type file. You never need to worry about this file. You just need to include it. There's a meta INF file. The only thing you need to worry about in this meta INF file is when you create a document for an EPUB that has the fonts embedded and you're just using the Google fonts because you want them to show up in Kindle, you delete this file out. If you're not worried about that, keep the file in. Your next part of the ebook is the most important. You have this OEBPS file. It contains all the contents of your ebook. There is a CSS folder that has a cascading style sheet. We'll get to that in a minute. There is a font folder, Parisian, Cinzel, and these Adobe Garamond folder fonts. We're going to delete the Adobe Garamond fonts because we do not want to force our readers to use the body text font that we picked out. Okay. Readers like to select their own, so I never force that upon readers. These other ones are only for the chapter titles and for the other titles. Okay, we don't care about the other fonts for the main body text. We want people to be able to choose that themselves. So I will delete those out because we don't leave those unnecessarily. Now, because we deleted that encryption out, these font files are the encrypted font files. They're not the full fonts. So now, because we deleted that encryption file out, these fonts are not going to view properly. So in this case, what I need to do, and I have my other screen over here, I actually need to pull these fonts. All right, so I'm going to show you this. This is my font folder for Cinzel. And there are two things that we need. I want you to look. Cinzel regular, Cinzel regular. This font file is 29 kilobytes. This font file is 92 kilobytes. We need the full font since we deleted the encryption font. So we're going to copy this. We're going to replace it. Okay. The next thing that we need is we need the license for that font. I like to include these licensings. So I called it cinzel_ofl.txt. So I'm just going to drop that in. All right. Now we need to look at Parisian. And I just have a font folder on my computer that I do this. We already, and it's important, you need to use open type fonts, not true type fonts, but open type fonts. And if you can only find a true type font, you can actually convert it to an open type font, okay? Because you will need the open type font for your ebook. So this Parisian font is 230 kilobytes, which is a little large, but that's where you have to determine, is it worth the size? And that's why a lot of times I will not embed fonts because they will increase the file size. So, you know, I'm going to keep it in for now. 230 kilobytes is a quarter of a megabyte. So I think we'll be okay with font size. I think I will still be able to keep this file under 500 megabytes, which is what my goal is. And that's it. So we added these text files, which are our licenses for the fonts, and we replaced those encrypted font folders with the actual full font. The next thing we're going to do is just look at our image directory. These are all our images that are included. We have the title page, we have one of the teapots and one of the scene breaks, and then the cover. Now you say, but we have multiple teapots throughout the book because we have them on the chapter title pages. Well, we only need one, okay? Because what happens is this works like an ebook. It's just a web page. It's just calling that one file up. So that's why I recommend not doing some sort of fancy linked chapter number with your decoration. Just have a decoration and then the chapter number as text, because if you had your chapter number fancy somehow merged in with your graphic, then that chapter number needs to become a graphic as well. And then that means that you would need a graphic for each chapter. So that for this book, that would be what, 15 graphics? That's where it starts adding it up. So keep it simple, use one graphic that is the same across the entire book. All right, and then this is our chapter, scene breaks, and then this is our file. The file size of these are pretty small. We're going to look at details. The largest one is the cover at 116 kilobytes. I don't think we need to optimize any of this, so I think we're good. Then we have all of these documents, okay? We have one called the Content OPF page. This is our manifest, basically. I'll open it up in a minute and show you what it looks like. We have a cover XHTML page. It's exactly what you think it is. It's the cover file. It's just the XHTML page referring to the cover file that's in the image folder. Then we have all of these files right here. These are all XHTML pages. These are actually all the pages of our ebook. So these are chapters. These could be the dedication, the copyright page, the about the author page, and each chapter. We have a TOC NCX, which is our navigation, and then we have the TOC XHTML, which is the navigation for an EPUB 3.0. If you did an EPUB 2.0, you would not have this XHTML TOC page. You would only have the TOC NCX page. All right, so let's look at the Content OPF page. Now, You can use any HTML editor. You can use an ebook editor such as Calibre. I always use Dreamweaver because I have the Adobe suite and I am familiar with Dreamweaver. I know it in and out. I can use grep in, or regular expressions as Dreamweaver calls it. I can make a lot of tweaks to my document because I know Dreamweaver. All right, so this is the content OPF page. If you are not familiar with HTML, this may look a little scary to you. You really do not need to worry about it too much. You don't need to make any changes to it. If I have any up here at the top, this first collection is your metadata. You can actually add in DOC colon keywords and add some keywords here. Um, I don't, unless the author requests it. I will delete out any blank metadata boxes, so I just deleted that. One thing to make sure of is that make sure your language is correct. So this is a English. This actually might be British English, but I am not quite sure. But we're just going to keep it U.S. English because that's how InDesign recognized it. If your document, I've had a couple of problems before in the past where InDesign recognized another language and it caused issues upon export to a Mobi file for Kindle. So always just double check that language just to make sure it is what it is. It is what it's supposed to be. All right, this is just a unique identifier number. It means nothing. It needs to be unique though. Here is your manifest. So what a manifest means is that this is all the contents of our ebook file. Okay, so each page, so we have the cover, and then each page, we have that TOC NCX listed, TOC XHTML, we have our cascading style sheet listed, and here are those Adobe Garamond fonts. Well, I deleted those out. So what does that mean? We need to delete them from the manifest. So I'm going to delete them. Here are the other two fonts. All right, but what else did we add? We added two additional files to our ebook. We added the licensing for those fonts. So that means we need to add two lines here that show us those files. Otherwise, your document will not validate. So what we're going to do is we are going, both of these were OFL licensing. So I'm going to copy this line. This is just my little cheat sheet. And I'm going to save. So we had Cinzel. We had the Cinzel OFL. And we actually, let's look at it to make sure. All right, this is the Cinzel. This is exactly the name of the file. So here is where we need to reference that. All right, and then the other one is Parisian, and we are going to do this. I'm going to just copy it here, and then it's the Parisian OFL. So they just need to match, otherwise it's not going to validate. So just make sure I have the file name properly. Yep, okay. All right, and then we have our graphics. So it's a seam break, T-set, and then our title PNG. There's nothing we need to do here. So most of the time, you're not going to need to worry about anything on the content OPF page unless you're embedding fonts and you're removing the body text fonts and you need to add in those text files that you included for the licensing of those fonts, okay? The spine, this means the order that the ebook should be shown in. We don't need to worry about this. InDesign did it automatically. Our guide, these are our landmark pages. If you want to add additional landmark pages, they would go here, okay? All right, so we are going to close that. We don't need to do anything else to the OPF page. And then we are going to look at the next group of pages. Here is our cover XHTML. We don't really need to do anything to that. And then what I like to do at this point is I just like to, actually first let's take a look at our CSS, because we're going to do some cleanup to our CSS, and then we'll take a look at all of these individual pages just to make sure everything looks okay. I use Dreamweaver to edit my CSS. Here is our CSS page. When you embed fonts, the first couple of things listed will be those fonts. Again, we deleted fonts, so we don't need all of those Adobe Garamond mentions. So I'm going to delete those. So we just need Cinzel and Parisian. All right. Now, InDesign creates kind of a yucky CSS. It puts a lot of things in that are not needed. For example, it tells all text to be black, which is kind of the default for any reader. So wherever it says color 000, I always remove that line. If you have other color in your document, don't worry about it. You don't need to remove that. Just remove the black line. Okay. The reason why I use Dreamweaver is because with Dreamweaver, we can search an entire folder or an individual page. So for this, to bring up their Find and Replace menu, you use, it's always instinct for me, it is Control Shift F. All right, so what I did here is I just clicked on this number 26 because that's this color line. So I did a Control C, and then I did a Control Shift F, which brings up the Find and Replace, and it actually already populated that color in my Find and Replace. We just want to get rid of this. We do not need to replace it with anything, and we're going to search the current document. So replace all, so it goes through my entire document and deletes everything. Now, when you get into manipulating this part, this is where it's very important you be very careful. And if you don't have a lot of experience in cascading style sheets or HTML or anything like that, that's where I highly recommend being very careful. All right, so we got rid of the Adobe Garamond font, so we don't need this. We do want to tell it to come in as a serif because it is best if they read in a serif, but by just choosing serif, whatever the default font is for their reader is what it's going to be viewed as, and then they can change that. Now that's for the main body text, the chapter titles, and our other titles are supposed to come through as our other fonts. All right, so I'm just going to copy this. So I copied from the quotation to the space right before serif, and we're going to do a Control C, and then we're going to do that Control Shift F, and that brought in everything. We're going to replace all, so that goes through the entire document and gets rid of that. Font size, I always change it to 1 EM. If you use 12-point font in your document, it will come through as 1 EM, but if you use anything lower or higher, it may come in larger. So I just always change whatever size it brings in for like chapter text and block quotes, all the normal stuff, not chapter titles, but just for those. So wherever it says font size 0.917 EM, I just change it to 1 EM. So we're going to replace all. So it changed it throughout the document. InDesign brings in normal. It tells all these variants, all these different font things to be normal. Well, that's the default. So we don't need to tell the reader to bring normal in, to tell it to be normal. So we're just going to get rid of those because they're kind of pointless. So to get rid of everything that's normal, so you'll see here font style, font variant, font weight, we'd have to search for each one of those. But the great thing about Dreamweaver is we can use regular expressions. As long as you have used regular expressions checked, this will work. So if we know all of these say colon, normal, semicolon, but then there's something before, we can search for that string. So what we're going to do where it says font style here, we're going to delete that out and we're going to replace it with open parentheses, asterisk, period. Oh, wait, hold on. It's hard when you say it. So open parentheses, period, asterisk, question mark, close parentheses. What that means is whatever we have spaces, we have this space here, then whatever is here, followed by a colon, followed by normal, followed by a semicolon, we want you to delete. So we're going to click on replace all. It got rid of everything that was assigned normal. Um, the next thing is we really don't need orphans. eBooks do not pay attention to orphans, so I usually delete those. I also delete the widows because most ebook devices do not use them. Sometimes some of the orphans come through as two, and sometimes they come through as one, so you may have to delete two different ones. The next thing I do, all these page breaks. These can create issues for iPads. They can bring extra page breaks in. So I generally delete those. I don't like that InDesign uses this method, so I like to get rid of it. But I can use my little method because there's tons of different types of page breaks in here. What I like to do is page dash break dash, then my little search for this string, followed by your semicolon, and that will get rid of all those page breaks. And then again, here's another one. For some reason, InDesign tells things to come through as none, which is a default. We're going to get rid of all of these none lines. So we're actually just cleaning up our CSS, making it a little bit more manageable. All right, now the next thing I like to do is go through my text indents and my spacing. Mobi files or Kindle files will look better if you use EMs as opposed to pixels. So I know I want my text indent to be 1 EM as opposed to 36. You can actually, if 1 EM is too small for you as a text indent, you can actually go up to 1.5 EM, but I just stick to 1 EM. So I'm going to search the entire CSS and look for text indent 36 and change it to 1 EM. And then the next thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to look at some of these margin tops, and I'm going to change them to 1 pixel of 1 EM. So this one is 18 pixels. I'm going to change it to 1 EM. Do a search for the whole document, and margin left, that's 54 pixels. I'm going to make that 2 EMs. And again, this is just personal experience, the way I've been doing it. 18 pixels, I'm going to change to 1 EM. And then when we view when we actually view the individual files, we may need to make adjustments to some of these. I'm just changing them as a whole. So I think that may do it. I don't think we need to worry about anything else. So, all right, so I think we're good. Here's some Garamons. We can just delete these lines out. Don't need to worry about those. Even though we tell InDesign not to bring in any overrides, sometimes it still does. All right, now we're going to close that, and then we're just going to open up each individual page just to look at. So what we're going to do is, starting with this Tea and Sympathy right here, I typically just take the first 10 and drag them and drop them in Dreamweaver, and then I'll just look at them. Okay, so with Dreamweaver, I have it to view where we actually view the what it looks like here, and the code is over here on this side. So for this page, it looks like the title page is coming through at 100% of width, which might be too big. So I'm going to tell it to make this smaller. I'm going to tell it to be like maybe 70% of the width, because we don't want it to come through huge. In order to tell it that, oh, there's a bunch of overrides in here for some reason. I'm just going to delete these out. We do not need this span class. This is just me. I like to clean up things. We don't need this. All right, so the only thing we need to worry about is this right here. All right, so this image class ID gen object attribute one. So if we click on up here, this is our CSS page that we had open a few minutes ago. And down towards the bottom, you'll see all these image classes. All right, so image class attribute one is at 100% width. Well, I don't want that to come in at 100%. I think I want that to come through at about 70, 75. So look what happened. That made that smaller. So now this graphic originally was set to come through at 100% of screen width is actually going to only come through at 70% on any device. All right. So that is really the other thing I like to do. I just like to take this title here and I will change it across the entire document. Okay, so InDesign for this title, and on some devices it doesn't matter, this doesn't show up at all, but for some devices it comes up as the page header. So I am just going to change it to where it should come through as Tea and Sympathy and with spaces. All right, I can change this. Now this title page is at the top of every document, so I want to change this across the folder. So I am going to tell it to look in this folder, book one, ebook, EPUB, in the OEBPS folder. Click on select. We want it to find wherever there is a title, and we want to find whatever text is between those two title tags, and we want to replace it with just Tea and Sympathy. All right, so now it's going to go through the entire document and it's actually changing that title to be exactly what I told it to be throughout the whole document. All right, and that's why I love using Dreamweaver. All right, so next page is our copyright page. Everything looks good. Here is a stupid paragraph override that we don't need. That's just me cleaning up things. Here is page 2. You will notice we have like this weird white box. Well, this was just an empty text frame that I did not delete out of the InDesign file, so we can select all of that and delete that. Everything else looks good here. Our Cinzel is coming through. Everything else looks good. And then we're going to look at 3. Here is our contents page. I may decide to center these instead of left aligned. So we're just going to go to TOC, chapter title, and change that from center to left to center, and also for the TOC other titles. Oh, nope. There's another one here, and this is what it's using. So it's text align center, text align center. Now it centers. Okay. And then this is just me being me. I like to clean up my code. I delete out all of these text anchors, but I use my little search feature where I find all the numbers. I do current document. This is, again, you don't have to do this. This is just me being silly. I like clean stuff, and we're going to replace all those. So this just looks a lot cleaner now because we don't need those text anchors in there. Now, if you have a TOC with headings, like if you have a nonfiction book that has like chapter title, heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, do not delete those out. Do not. You need those for that, but for simple novels, we do not. Unless you did not put page breaks in for each individual chapter title, then you will need those in. Okay. All right, so the next page is going to be chapter 1. Well, this is our teapot. It looks a little too big. And I think I want my teapot to come through at about 25% of the width. So we need to look at the image attribute. It's going to be image class 2. So I'm going to flip to our CSS, go down to the bottom, and change that image attribute 2 to be 25% of screen width, which is going to make it smaller. I also, whoops, didn't mean to do that. I also think chapter 1 needs to be a bit bigger. Okay, so we're going to modify chapter title in our CSS. So we're going to search for chapter title. Right now, the font size is 1.83 433. We're going to change that to be, let's try 2.5 EM and see how that looks. All right, so I think that's a little bit better. I might even go for 3. Okay, all right, so that's good. I think that will work great. And then look at this mess. I will tell you that drop caps will drive you mad in eBooks. Okay, it is almost impossible to get a drop cap to look good across the board on every single device. It's almost impossible. And when InDesign brings things in, it does not do a very good job at bringing them in properly. Okay. So the question you have to ask yourself, is it worth um, including drop caps, knowing this? I still do. Some clients will come tell me, "Oh, all my drop caps are screwed up. None of them look good. Can they be adjusted?" I'm like, "Well, let's remove them then, because it's hard to make them perfect across everything." But I will adjust them. I will keep them in for this, but I just need to go in and modify my drop cap settings. All right, so here is our drop cap settings, this ID Gen drop cap 1. It is float left, it's Parisian. The font size I think is going to be okay. Let's just make that a 4 instead of that 4. So it's going to make it a little smaller. Line height 1. I am going to make the bottom margin be a negative -0.1. That might be too much. 0.2. Let's keep it where it was at for now. We might modify that in a little bit. I know we need to change the margin right a little bit because there's certain letters that bled over into this space right here. And then we actually want to take our top margin to a negative number. So let's see what 1.5 EM looks like. All right, so that's looking a little better. This raised it up. And let's raise this up to be about 0.2, see where that gets us. And let's take that bottom. All right, we're going to leave it here for now. All right, the I looks good. The H looks good. The L actually looks pretty good. Let's just look. All right, so good morning. I'm just looking at that L because it looks like there's an extra space there, but there isn't. Okay. This could be where if you didn't like that space of the L, you could tell it. Just want to make sure there's not a space there. You could tell it to, you could create another drop cap style and tell the right margin space for that drop cap. Actually, I'll show you how to do that right now. We'll look at this right here. So I'm going to copy this whole line. And we're going to say drop cap 2, which is really for L, and we want that margin right to be 0 EM. And then we're going to save that, and we are going to change in the code this L. We are going to tell it to be drop cap 2. Okay, that's too much, so we can go in and make some tweaks to that. And we want it to be 0.05. That spaces it out a little bit more, 0.08, a little bit more. It's funny, you know. Okay, now that'll do it. All right, so now let's look at this one. That's all looking okay. This L looks just fine, but we'll go ahead and change it to the 2, and that'll space it out a little bit more. This I is a little space, but that's okay. Let's see if that adjusted it any. Nope, I think we're fine. This L, we'll change it to 2. There's a space after, so we can delete that. We're going to change this L to ID drop cap 2. See how if you're not familiar with HTML and CSS, this could be very confusing for you. But I've been doing this for a while, and actually before I did this, I actually did web pages. So I'm pretty familiar with it. All right, so this T is coming through really funky, and that's because there's another CSS class in here causing it to look funny. So we are going to delete that out. We have to delete another span. Let's see, all caps. P A. I'm going to go ahead and delete this anchor because we don't need it. First pair drop caps, span class. I think that's it. All right. So that cleared that one up. And that T, we may need to change this to the 2 just to give that a little bit more space. Here's the L again. We know we need to, and it's looking funny because it has this extra span class drop cap. This is just one of those silly things that InDesign does. I'm going to delete that out. And then we're going to change this to 2. That one's fine. This I is fine, except there might be an extra space here. All right. So just go through each page, making adjustments as needed. Now, the angry thing that can drive you crazy is that you can make all these adjustments, but then when you actually view it, all of these adjustments did nothing for you. So that's why sometimes it's just best not to do the drop caps. Learn from experience, but you know, I like to challenge myself, so I like to include drop caps. All right, again, what you can do is, so I don't have to search for this because these drop caps, these span class drop caps are what's causing issues. So we're going to tell it to look through span class drop cap, find whatever's in between those span class drop caps, and just put whatever's between it there. This $1 means that whatever is here, we want to put here. So we're deleting out that drop cap with a span. We want to search for the folder, make sure we're in the folder, and we're just going to do a replace all. And that will correct all of those areas where that, for some reason, that drop cap was in there. But we have to refresh it. Oh, and then InDesign sometimes will let you view it properly. Sometimes it'll refresh it automatically and sometimes it won't. So we'll come back to that. Let's look at this. Yeah, let's see if it'll refresh. All right, so let's delete this text anchor. That may be causing it as well. All right, so sometimes, in some cases, we may need to delete that text anchor out. That text anchor actually served no purpose, so you can actually delete them out. Again, this one, delete that text anchor. Again, if this is a nonfiction book, those text anchors may serve some sort of purpose, but for this, I know they don't. So we can delete them, and they're causing more pain. All right, one thing I did not mention is that these seam breaks, all right? And actually, speaking of, I need to go back to our title page. For graphics, I mean, this is a text graphic. This is not text, this is actual graphic. If a person is reading an ebook or having the ebook read to them, like the device is reading them. For any images, if they don't have anything in the alt tag for the image, it's not going to read anything. All right. So this is a title. So we want to add our title to our alt tag for the image. And that way the device will read the title. So I'm just going to put T in sympathy, book one in the T, and remember, don't use ampersands. Bless me. Sorry about that. Sympathy, mystery by J. New. Okay, so we're going to have that in our alt tag. The reason why I bring this up is because we need to include a scene break alt tag. Otherwise, it's not going to read it properly. So it will actually read this as a scene break. So we are going to search our entire document for our little scene break, and we're going to tell it to replace it with that same information, but we're just going to add scene break in our alt tag so it will read that graphic. It'll say scene break. Okay. So by doing that, every single scene break now has that information in it. And I'm just going to delete those anchors because they are not okay. And for the T, we're going to go ahead and change that to 2 to give it a bit more space. Here's another T, but that T doesn't look nearly as bad. And this may have an extra space in it, but it does not. What about this one? Yes, there's an extra space in that one. So I'm going to delete that. And again, how much you spend cleaning up your document at the end is really up to you. This is just me being particular. I want them to look a certain way, so I like to make these little tweaks in the end. All right, so we're just going to delete these anchors. Now, I could do a find and replace and delete all the anchors out. Don't do that if you have a nonfiction book where you have a lot of headings that are in the table of contents, because those anchors are what tell it to, those anchors are like call out spots for the TOC to take them to that area. So they're very important. And if you delete them out, you will get a lot of errors when you go to validate. And we will talk about validating in a little bit, but for this ebook, it doesn't matter. And one more. Okay. You know what? I am going to delete these out. We don't need them. So I am going to use my little code and replace it with nothing. So that gets rid of all of those breaks. Looking at this one, I want my other titles to be a bit bigger, so let me just search for other titles, and we are going to make this, let's go ahead and make it 2 EM. Okay. We don't need any changes here. I think we're okay on this page. We'll save that one. Here is another area where there's a bunch of just blank div tags. I'm going to delete all of those out. That was just InDesign. If there's a blank text frame, it brings them in as those blank div tags. It's kind of annoying. All right, so here is our document. Let's change this. And I could have done a find and replace and changed all the L's and the T's to that drop cap too. All right, why aren't you working, number lock? And looks like there might be an extra space, but there's not. Here we need to change this to drop cap 2. This needs to be drop cap 2. T is fine. H may be spaced. Nope. L. to go ahead and change this last one. All right, here's another one. This one I think is because of the quotation. We're going to move that quotation in with a T. Joseph, there is no space, even though there looks like there is. And the S, we're just going to change that to 2. All right, and then the last page. Change that to 2. Change that to 2. See how much easier it would be if you said, let's not do these drop caps. We'd already be done. Okay. I think we're fine there. All right, so now we've gone through them all. Now what do we do? Well, let's look at the TOCs. Okay, because we took those anchors out, we need to modify these because these right here, these are calling to the anchors, which are no longer there. So we're going to have problems with validating our EPUBs. So we need to delete these out. And we just want them to be without that ID pair destination. Okay. So this should work. Current document. All right. So now what? Now I think we're done. So what we're going to do is we're going to repackage this file. So to do that, it has to be in this order. So make sure it's sorted properly. It can't be in this order. It needs to be in this order. So the meta INF comes first, followed by the OEBPS, followed by the MIME type. Just click on the MIME type, then right click, send to compressed zip folder. Then drag the meta INF folder down, and then drag the OEBPS folder down. That's the only way you can do it. If you do it any other way, it's not going to validate. So T and sympathy, and then this is where you can change it back to an EPUB and number it and add the EPUB extension. It's going to say it might become unstable, but we know it's not, so we're going to click on OK. Now, what we need to do is we need to validate it. I have on my other screen, I have an EPUB checker from Pagina. I'll bring it over here now. I just drag and drop the file onto it on my desktop, and it's going to check it, and it gives me no errors or warnings, so I know I didn't introduce any mistakes. All right, so here is the completed EPUB. We're just going to take a quick look at it to see how it looks. Okay. The Cinzel is still not coming through, but I'm not going to worry about trying to figure that one out. Okay, I think everything looks okay. You can scroll through it and check everything out. Then we can close it. Sometimes certain fonts just do not come through. I do not know why. I'm not going to worry about the Cinzel though. If it was the chapter title, I might worry about it. But for Cinzel, I'm not. The next thing I do is, even though Kindle KDP no longer accepts Mobi files, they only want you to upload an EPUB or a KPF file. But you, as authors, we may still want to send Mobi files out to people, like for BookFunnel. So I like to go ahead and create a Mobi file. So I just drag and drop that EPUB into Kindle Previewer. And that way you can see what it looks like on a Kindle device as well. Sinzel comes through here. Isn't that funny? The one that you would expect it not to come through, and it did. So the drop caps look great here, but I will tell you they will not look like this across every single Kindle device. You can also see what it looks like on a phone, and you'll see that that little teapot went down because we had it set to 25% of screen, just like the title page, it went down because we have it set to 25% of screen, or this one's set to 75% of screen. Now, the seam bricks came through a little large because I didn't actually change those. I didn't adjust those. So I probably should have, but I'm not going to worry about that because they don't look bad. Then you can view what this looks like on like an ink, Kindle e-reader, like a e-ink device kind of thing. And so this is what it's going to look like there. So I think it looks great. So we're going to export it. I am going to send my client the KPF file. And I'm also going to send them the Mobi file. Okay, so I'm going to create the Mobi file. And now it is time for me to send to the client, and then it's done.